In my experience, one of the most difficult things about Patreon is getting out of a slump. Some people's slump is $0 a month, and they never get any traction, they never get any additional patrons, while others have a slump that's something more like $300 or $400 a month. And I was stuck at $300 or $400 for a long time until I figured out a great trick that I'm going to share with you that doubled and even tripled my amount of patrons. That's coming up next. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and my channel specializes in helping artists like you be more successful at what you do. So let's go ahead and talk about how to increase your patrons on Patreon. So here's a chart showing my pledge growth on Patreon. We want to take a look at January 2016 and January 2017 and what's happened in between those two dates. You can see this plateauing going on right about here, and this actually goes way, way back for quite a while. I really wasn't getting a whole lot of growth or a whole lot of traction. But right around here, right around August 2016, you can see that all of a sudden, it's starting to go up and up and up and up and up, and it's just going to keep going up. So you can see I went from about $427 a month to $1,354 a month on Patreon. That's about 3x growth. And if we continue on from 2016 to 2017, there's about 2x growth. So what is it that happened right around here in August 2016 to cause that growth to happen? And what can you do to hopefully have a similar result on your Patreon? Now, I have a bunch of tips here that you can use that I've categorized, but first let me start with the most obvious one. You have to offer something to your patrons. There's a lot of Patreon creators out there that are like, oh, hi, I'm Aaron Rutten. I make art, and if you give me money, I'm not going to give you anything. I'm not going to do anything differently. I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. So cool, give me $1. Yeah, right. That's not going to happen. No one's going to give you anything. The overall premise of Patreon is that if somebody's going to give you money, you're going to give them something in return or do something. There has to be a reason for it. And so a lot of those channels that are just plateauing and just stuck at $0 a month or $1 a month, that's because they're not offering anything to their patrons. You don't have to offer commissions or anything that's going to take up a lot of your time or cost you money. You can offer things that you're already creating, but you have to at least mention that you're going to give somebody something to show your appreciation for their support. So I would start there. If you're not doing that, definitely think about stuff that you can give away. If you want some ideas for rewards, just go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Aaron Rutten and look at some of the stuff that I'm giving away. Check out some other Patreon creators and see what they give away. There's a lot of great resources on Patreon as well that will give you some suggestions. So moving on to my tips, the first category is experimentation. You have to be willing to experiment and try new things. If you're just doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting results, that's probably why you're not getting results. Patreon is not set in stone. You can offer a reward and then decide that that's not working for you or nobody likes it, and then you can change it to something else. Just be transparent with your audience and just let them know what you're changing, and that's fine. In fact, they'd probably prefer that you change it up and that you start offering better rewards. So for me personally, what I did is I would just have an idea for a reward and I'd go, all right, that's an awesome idea, and I'd try it, and if I fell flat on my face, then I would scrap that idea. And no one had a problem with it because no one enjoyed that reward to begin with. If there's a reward that worked really well and everybody liked, obviously I hung on to that and I kept doing it and I tried to improve it and make it better. So you want to keep the rewards that work, you want to get rid of the ones that don't. One of the things that's been the most helpful for me is to get feedback from my patrons, doing polls and surveys and just asking questions. Now, obviously that's a little bit harder to do if you have 0 patrons. If you're starting a Patreon, it probably means that you have an audience already, so maybe poll your current audience of people who aren't patrons yet and ask them what they might want. And in the case that you've started a Patreon and you don't have an audience, well, you probably got the cart in front of the horse, and it's better to go back and build your audience first and then start a Patreon later. Now, going back to getting feedback a little bit, I even went to the extent of having like a really complicated poll that said, here's all the rewards I offer. How do you rank these? Are they valuable to you? Are they valuable to somebody else? Are they not valuable? And really did an in-depth survey and got a great idea of what people like and what people don't. And that's helped me a lot because my assumptions about what people are going to like are very, very different from what my patrons actually enjoy. And there were a lot of times where my patrons suggested rewards that they would like to see, and in some cases, those have been really popular, and I've gone ahead and implemented those rewards. Real-time versions of my video is one such example where I thought, no one's going to want to sit through a 4.5-hour video without any narration, just watching me paint at real speed. But guess what? There's a lot of my patrons who actually really do want to see that, and they find that very valuable. So even though I didn't think that would be a good reward, other people do. So it just shows that your own preconceptions of what people will like aren't necessarily always true. Moving on to the next category, I call this category identification. You want to be able to look at what you have and what you're already creating and see if that has value or if you can add to that and create value for your patrons. For example, I found something that I was offering for free already and I made it a reward instead. This is my Corel Painter workspace and brushes, and this is really probably my most popular reward. I create new brushes each and every month and I make them available in my workspace. I make sure that my workspace is very organized and always up to date, and there's a page on my website where you can download each individual brush or the box files, and it just makes it really, really easy and very organized to find what you're looking for. I couldn't afford to do that earlier without Patreon funding. So once I tied Patreon funding to that, it became a great relationship where the people who enjoy my brushes in my workspace get to know that I'm going to update it every month and add new brushes every month. And I get to know that I can rely on their support each month to make it so that I have time to keep that workspace updated. So if you're wondering what happened right about here, that's exactly what happened. I was giving away my workspace and getting basically nothing in return because I was leaving it up to people to donate if they wanted to. And surprise, surprise, most people never donated anything. They just download the workspace. And that's fine because it was free, but that was my choice to make that free. And when I had the idea to stop making it free and start putting it on Patreon, then that's when this growth happened. And so I identified something that worked really well that I was misusing. I was giving it away for free, and that was just not a good idea. As soon as I put it on Patreon, boom, it took off. Now you might be thinking, well, you just took something that you were offering and you put it behind a paywall, and now people are going to hate you. Your fans are going to turn against you. Well, no, that's not the case. My fans didn't turn against me because I explained it in a way as I explained it earlier. Sure, I had a workspace that I was giving away for free, but I just updated it randomly here and there, maybe every few months, and it wasn't any more than just a workspace file. You couldn't go and download each individual brush. It wasn't categorized and sorted and polished and looking all pretty. There wasn't any consistency to it. And as I mentioned earlier, once people started to download it as a reward for pledging to my channel, it made it a mutually beneficial relationship that worked. They'd get an updated workspace, and I'd be able to update the workspace, and it just made the whole thing better. So you have to be able to clearly show the benefit for offering something to patrons that was formerly free. You have to improve upon it, and you have to show why it's better. So I could simply say with patron support, I can update the workspace every month rather than unpredictably. I can add new brushes each month, and I have more time to create those brushes. Those brushes are sorted and organized on a download page that's well organized and updated each month to include new content. In addition to new brushes, there's also box files and other types of downloads that I wasn't previously offering. You can also have input on the brushes that I create. I'll also provide tech support. So basically, I'm offering much better quality than what I was able to deliver for free. And that's not all. There's also all of the other rewards that I offer as well. So it's really not hard to sell people on that if you just explain it. So that essentially explains what I did to trigger this trajectory here of getting more and more patrons. But that's not all there is to it. You have to be able to sustain that growth. You have to be able to keep it going. Otherwise, it's going to fizzle out and you'll plateau again, or you'll start going back down. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep going up. So we want to build upon our success. So that brings us to the next category, which is promotion. I promoted my new brushes in brush demo videos on YouTube. I sent out notifications via social media for each set of new brushes each month. I mentioned my new brushes in an email newsletter. I used my brushes in my YouTube tutorials. I promoted the brushes in my course content and descriptions. I promoted the brushes in YouTube descriptions and cards and end cards. I also promoted those brushes on my Patreon page and in the description of the rewards on Patreon and in dedicated Patreon videos such as my group art challenge. So basically, it's all fine and dandy if I have those brushes there, and sure, if you want them, you can go get them. But if I'm not constantly telling people about those brushes every single month or multiple times a month, new people aren't going to go there and become my patron. So obviously, there's that really valuable reward there, but you need to help people discover that, and they can go, oh, I want some of that too. So after we've got that momentum going and people are starting to discover our reward and we're starting to get some traction and some upward trajectory, then we want to make sure that we can sustain that. So I make sure to post as consistently as I can each month, and I make sure to deliver on all of the promises that I make as best I can. You know what? Stuff happens, and if you get sick and you can't deliver on something, as long as you're honest and you explain why, people are going to understand that you're a person just like they're a person, and don't stress so much about being inconsistent if it's just a little bit here and there. If you're constantly inconsistent, then you need to look at your rewards and make sure that they're actually sustainable. In addition to posting consistently, I also make sure to answer comments, and people can count on me to reply to something if they ask me a question, or if they post or share their artwork, I'll say something about it. You have to make sure to engage with your patrons. Another way you can keep them engaged, as I mentioned earlier, is through the content that you share, through polls, or ask them questions. And then one of the most important factors of sustainability is thinking about what it is that you can do to keep people from dropping off and canceling their pledges. Obviously, a lot of people are only going to pledge for a limited time, and that's awesome. And I appreciate all of the support that I've gotten, regardless of how long it is. Even if it's just $1 for 1 month, that's awesome. And I don't expect everybody to pledge to me for the rest of their lives. That's just not going to happen. So there is some turnaround that happens. There's going to be people who will pledge and then they'll stop pledging. They might pledge again later. But if there's something that you can do to kind of encourage people to continue pledging rather than just try it once and decide they don't like it, then that's going to make a big difference in sustaining your Patreon. One of the things I've found that works the best is instant gratification. There's people who will sign up for Patreon and they don't really necessarily see all of the content there or get that has value. And sometimes people just want something like a product that they can download instantly. And so one of the things that's helped for me is to have all these things like brushes that you can get instantly and videos that you can watch instantly. But also if you have something like a PDF or something that people can download, maybe it's a course, maybe it's a video, but just something that you put out there and say, if you pledge to my Patreon, you're going to get this, this, and this immediately. And if you can make those rewards evergreen, that's even better. And what I mean by evergreen is they're always going to be useful. It's not something that's going to be useful for like a month and then it won't be useful anymore after that. It's something where current patrons can enjoy it, and then if somebody comes along 2 or 3 or 4 years later, they can still enjoy that too. If you need to update it to freshen it up a bit, you can always do that. So to give you an idea of what I offer for my instant downloads, I have PDFs such as my color guide for digital painting, and I even have a free landscape painting crash course that patrons can download the premium version of. So once you've figured out how to sustain your growth, let's say you're here and you're continuing along this trajectory, then what we want to do is we want to try to ratchet up the growth. We want to try to get that angle higher and higher so we're getting more rapid growth. In order to do that, we want to refine our channel, because if what we're doing is working really well, if we can make that better, that should give us more growth. So one of the things that I've done, which I feel has been immensely helpful, is I made it easier to find my rewards and to use my Patreon through help videos and tutorials. There's a landing page that I created for my website that has all of my rewards and it describes all of them and it provides links for them. That way it's super easy for my patrons to be able to access my rewards, and they don't have to dig around through the Patreon website, which can be a little bit difficult to navigate. There's been a lot of cases where people have stopped pledging because they're not happy with the way Patreon works because they can't even figure out how to find my rewards. And even though I feel like I've made them super obvious, they're just super obvious to me, but not to everyone else. And so the more you can do to make Patreon easier to follow and easier to use, and the easier you can make it for patrons to find the rewards, the longer they're going to stick around. Another thing that I've done, which I feel has been very helpful, is I continue to tweak my rewards to eliminate less popular offerings, and I put more focus on the ones that are really driving subscriptions, such as the brushes that I offer and the coupons I offer for my courses and the long format real-time videos. If that's what my patrons want to see, then I need to be putting my time into more of that. And if there's things that people really aren't enjoying, such as the private live streams I was doing and some of the other things I was offering, people obviously aren't using that for a reason because they just don't find it valuable. So why dedicate hours of my time each month to something that people could care less about? So do yourself a favor, do your patrons a favor, and eliminate anything that's just a useless reward. It's also important to never stop experimenting. Obviously, if something is working, you probably don't want to mess with it too much. If you can make it better without completely wrecking it, that's awesome. But don't stop thinking about other rewards that you can offer, because there might be other things that are still just as valuable that you haven't tried yet. So for example, one of the things that I tried was to ask people what they thought about rewards and did some different polls, narrowed down a specific price that people were willing to pay for a higher tier. And I got some information ahead of time, which was very helpful. Now, what I ended up doing was creating a reward tier that allows my patrons to sponsor captions. They pay a little bit extra to be in this higher reward tier, and that gives me money that I can use to pay to have a third party caption my videos. That makes my videos easy to follow for everybody. It allows my videos to be auto-translated into other languages, which opens me up to a more international audience. And again, it makes the videos easier to follow for people who speak a language other than English. So it's something that benefits not only the person pledging, but it benefits the entire art community as a whole. Now, I didn't know when I created this reward if it was going to be successful or not. I had a pretty good idea that it would probably do well since I got some feedback from my patrons ahead of time, but I just had to put it out there and just see what happened. And right off the bat, I had one person pledge that amount, and now I'm up to 3, and it's my highest reward tier. It's allowing me to caption my videos, and that's awesome because that's making my content a lot more accessible. And those people who are pledging that amount can feel good knowing that they're helping support that. All right, so now we've started to get some growth, we've sustained that growth, and we've refined that growth to continue to grow more rapidly. But now what do? Do we just kind of kick back and just let that money come in? Or do we continue to develop our strategy and think 2 steps ahead of ourselves into the future, or try to think about new rewards to offer or ways to make Patreon better? And so this is the final category of tips, which is strategizing. So I can look at my growth here and I can see that if I'm here in February, if I follow that same trajectory, then I'm probably going to be around 3,000 a month in August, assuming that I grow at the same rate. But I don't want to grow at the same rate. I want to figure out how I can double that and I can grow even faster. I want this growth here to look basically like this here, and I want there to be a huge jump. So I don't want to be content with the growth that I have now. It's awesome and it's great that I have growth, but if I get stagnant and I don't keep adding to it, then there's the potential that it's going to fizzle out or plateau again, and I don't want that. I want to continue learning from these lessons that I've discovered right around here, and I want to keep applying that so I can keep having more and more of these events that trigger growth. So I want to keep an eye on my analytics. I want to always be one step ahead of myself and plan for the future, and I want to think about what I can do to drive more subscriptions. And I think if you take all of this advice and you apply it to your Patreon, you're going to have growth too. It might be less, it might be more, it might be equal, who knows? But nevertheless, I think these tips are going to be very beneficial. If you found this information helpful, take a quick second to like this video. And if you're interested in more helpful tutorials for digital artists like yourself, make sure to click that subscribe button and enable notifications. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.